Welcome back to the last part of the recording. We had an issue in the call, so the last part in the call was not recording, so I'm doing it again after the call. Before we start, I want to address two issues that we had in the code. One of them was that the bcrypt.compare was not working, and it turned out because I was using a function called compare, and I was not sending the callback method, which was here, and the result would be returned here. So this is the async way, or asynchronous way, which always returns the function, and a function is always true. So that was an incorrect use. I only had to use another method called compare sync, short for synchronous, meaning I don't have to send a callback. It just returns, it blocks the execution until the value is returned, and I can use it in this format. So that worked. I didn't read the documentation. So this is the fix for comparing the password with the hashed value. The second error was that in the login page, even if we got an error in the login, we still get redirected to the home page. And if we go to the login/component, the problem was that even if we return 401, that still goes to the success. It doesn't go to the catch. It doesn't go to the error. So to fix that, I added an unauthorized error module. And if I got an error in the login, I would go to next with an error instead of returning status 401 and send a message. So I would do this instead. And you can check the unauthorized error module in your own time. So these are the two things, and let's check that the app is working now. So let's log out. Let's log in again. Let's go for test hack your future and just enter in the password. It will throw an error and it's not going to redirect. And if I type Jacob, it will go to the home page and I'll be logged in. So these are the 2 points. Then I want to go through the main code, which is this one we didn't go through in the last video, and explore the full demo, that things that we didn't write, and especially going through the use of React context, which I recommend reading online. I sent one of the links in the channel, and I showed it in the video in the call as well. And if you want to read about it, just check the auth README. You can find the link here. And this is a replacement to Redux. If you have any simple usages, React context should be enough. And the use that we have here is we want to wrap the whole application with the logged in state and read this value if you're logged in or not, and show or hide buttons or enable disable buttons based on the logged in status. So let's see how that works. We added a folder called contexts with only one context in it. This is how to create a context. As simple as that. React will create context, and then you send a value. Could be a string, could be an object. I choose to create an object and have these 3 values: the token value, the email, and is logged in true or false. And I would depend on all of them. And then I created another function to fetch the value of these 3 depending on the availability of the auth token key in the local storage. So this would be called an add.js later on to fill the context. But this is the context itself. But since we're here, let's go through the function. So in here we have the default value, same as above. And then we try to get the item auth token from local storage if it's there. And even if it's there and the value is undefined as a string or null as a string, because I got this problem that broke my app, so I had to handle this case. So it could be saved as a string because we set it in undefined in different cases. I'm not my code is not defensive enough to handle these cases, so I'm just fixing it here. If it's not any of these edge cases, if it's a string, it's an actual string, and it's not these two, and the underscore or low dash is string, we'll check that it's not null, and that it has a value as well, and that it's of type string. Then, if that's the case, then I would decode the auth token and get the email out of it. And I know that I added a value in that. And we can check something else. So in the application, I'm not sure if that was in the last video or not, but here's one of the tokens. Let's get this value. And again, the JSON Web Token is split in 3 parts: the header, the payload, and the signature. You can see the dot separator between all 3 of them. If we copy the whole token and go to jwt.io, we'll be able to paste the encoded value here. So let's remove whatever we have and then paste the thing that we got in our application. We will be able to see the type is JSON Web Token, and then the payload, the thing that we added. I added the email hest@hackerfeature.com in the auth controller/auth. So when in the function called create token, I set this as the payload, and now I see that email with the value itself. And then the signature is something that only the server can decode, and this is the part where the server verifies that this token is actually ours and it's not signed by someone else. So that's the verification part that happens only in the server. So this verify token, when you send the password, it tries to decrypt the last part, and if it works, then it's actually ours. So that's the JSON Web Token. And in the context, going back there, so we decode and get the payload, which is the middle part, which contains the email because we set it. We set that in the context, and we set the token as a whole in case we needed that. And we set the value is logged into true, which we will depend on later. So this is just a function that reads from the local storage and sets some values in an object and returns this object. And later on, we're gonna set this object in the context in actually the app.js, which is gonna be in the next step. So this is the, we created the context. Now we're gonna wrap our main application in that provider. We don't have to wrap the whole app.js. We could just wrap a certain part where this context is meaningful, but in our case, the login context, or we could have called it user context or token context or whatever, we need to wrap the whole application because it's going to be used everywhere. So in our app.js, right under the app, right under the ID equal app for React, I created the login context of provider, which I got from here. So I imported the login context, which is the main thing from React, and our function that loads the value from local storage. And then using login context of provider, and I knew this format from the documentation. I give the initial value from the value I loaded here. And notice that this is in the render. So whenever a change happens in app.js, it will fetch the updated value from the context. So if I log in or log out, this gets updated. So the value in the context gets updated, and it becomes available to every component in the whole app. And that's how it's going to be reactive immediately. And the first usage of this context, so we created the context. That's just one line in contexts here. So we created it. This is really a helper, so it doesn't really count. So we have the context, then in app.js, we imported it, and we just created the login context of provider. That's the second line, and give it the initial value. Then in the third line where I actually use that is in any component we want. So let's go to the header because we have the login button. So the functionality I want here is when I'm logged in, I want to show a log out button. If I'm logged out, I want to show a login button. So to link this component to the context, you do this. You say static context type equals the context you have, and you just import a thing from your module, and it's in context login, and we just import it. It's default. It is a default thing, and you set it as static context type. Then you have the context in this component, and you can just use this context, and this context would have the value that was set in the provider that was in app.js. So if we go all the way back to app.js, now whatever we set here, which we got from this function, which I moved to the context module just for modularity, it got here, we set it in the value. Now it's available through this object. So is logged in is coming from here. This is the value of it. It's either false or true from this file called by this line and set here, and now it's available here. Okay, so this the context of is logged in depends on the availability of the token in local storage. If we have a token, then means I'm logged in, so show the logout link and show my email, which I have available in the context as well. If that's not the case, this is a ternary operator. So the else part, if I'm logged out, if I'm not logged in, show the login link and don't show the email because I don't have any email. And the demo part of this, login, I go to the link to just get me to the form. So I'm going to type the credentials that we have. I'm going to log in. I get redirected to home page, and immediately because the local storage value gets updated, then the app.js gets refreshed and it goes to the header.js and it renders this. We could go through the debugging part and actually see how this works in the code itself, but maybe we can do this at the end of the video. So this is how the context work, and we can have another use of this. So let's search where else I used it. So I used it in events.js to render the button of add event only when I'm logged in. So instead of rendering the button here, I created a function to render it. And here I use something called class names, and class names is a library that adds the class based on a Boolean value. So this makes here class names, it takes button, outline, danger, like all this is normal React, and this is the JavaScript part, and class names is a library imported from class names, and it's the same module in npm, and this will add the disabled class if this is true, if the right hand side of this is true. So the disabled class will be added to this if the user is not logged in. If you're logged in, it's not going to be there. So basically, I'm just disabling the button if you're logged out. Another approach which I added here, instead of having the disabled, you could have an if condition, and if you're logged in, you have the button, otherwise you just return null. So it just hides the button. There are two different implementations, and you can just choose whatever fits your business or whatever you like. And the same approach was used in the event list, in the edit button. So again, the disabled part, you could again remove that if you want using an if condition. This is just normal React. So you have a value here, you depend on it, and you write your logic. What else should we discuss? Yep. So I discussed as well securing all the requests coming from the client or going from the client, and we discussed adding the authorization header that contains the token in every fetch, but adding that in every fetch in every file is not the best thing we can do. So what to do? I created a method under lib/auth, create anywhere, that takes the same parameters as a fetch, takes a URL and a JSON object for properties. If you don't send it, it defaults to an empty JSON object, and it gets the value from auth token, and it checks if the auth token is not available, which I think this might fail sometimes. So let me go to here and copy this. So we want to check if it's not there. So if it's not string, or it equals undefined, or it's a null. So this is a better check. Feel free to update that if you feel it's too much. So if it's not defined or it's not null, and it's any of these edge cases, then we just reject. We say that the login token is missing. We just send unauthorized. So what's going on here in the protected fetch? We wrap the fetch call in another promise, and if the token is not available in the local storage, we send a rejection directly from the front end. We don't even call the server. It doesn't reach the real fetch. But then if the token is there, then I use a method in Lodash to set a property with a path. So here I want to set headers.authorization. So I don't have to check that the headers exist, then set headers.authorization and worry about all the special condition. I use this beautiful function to set this path in this object with this value. You can check the documentation in Lodash. It's pretty nice. So this will set our auth token as headers.authorization in this object, and this just copies the properties to another object, because it's not recommended to change properties directly. So I just copied it and updated the new one. So I expanded it using the REST operator and wrapped it in a new JSON object, which creates another one. It's a copy hack. Then and I call the actual fetch with the URL and the props with authorization, which is whatever properties was sent to me added with the authorization added to that. And then I would send that to the result of the promise I return, and then it's going to continue with the same logic you have. And if you have an error I reject, then it's going to code the catch in the other one. Let's see how this method is used. So here, protected fetch. So this, you would use it exactly as you would use a fetch. So normally you would have something like this, and with the URL and then the properties. If we don't have the protected fetch, we would have to add headers and then authorization with the value from the auth token local storage. Here would be local storage.getItem, and this is I capital, and then auth token. And then we have to check before that the auth token actually exists. If it doesn't exist, then we don't call the server, because this is a protected endpoint, so it will break if it doesn't have an endpoint. So instead of doing all of this, we can not send this here, and we can just call the protected fetch, and it's going to do that for us with the basic properties, and it's going to continue and add the rest. So I used it in the submit of add and edit, and I used it in the delete, and feel free to use it in any endpoint that you feel that needs to be secure. And just notice that we allow the anonymous access to all get events. So anonymous users, meaning users that are not logged in, can see and browse the application, but they cannot add, they cannot edit, and they cannot delete. So don't add this in every endpoint, only in the endpoints that change something in the data. And of course, the same in the backend endpoints. So in the controller / events, you will see that I added the middleware, the routes / events. You will see that I added the authenticated route middleware only on the post, put, and delete, which means add, edit, and delete. And I left the other two not protected. Anyone can access them without any authentication. So you have it. If you sent a token, I'm not going to check that. If you didn't, I still am not going to check that. It's going to go through anyway when it's get or when it's list or get. So this is the routes, controllers. We discussed the context, the protect thing, protect fetch. So we can go now through the general changes that happened in the app. So we added 4 packages. We added a JSON Web Token to create the token itself. We added bcrypt to hash the password. We added class names for conditional class names in HTML elements or React elements or whatever. Then the last thing we added is Lodash, which is a JavaScript utility to make writing code easier. What I want to check, I want to show you the effect of the class names. So if we check the edit here or the add event, so I want to select this element and show you that it has the disable here. So this is the event / add, has the disable thing. But if I log in and go to events, then I inspect this element, I see that the disable is not there, and this is the effect of class names. So that would be in events list view. No, that's the edit, would be here in events. But yeah, this is the part. So this returns null if you're logged in. And now you can send more properties in the same object. You can check the documentation as well. So we added these 4 libraries, and we discussed new concepts like the React context. Again, you can check the documentation and the files. I'm going to go through all the files in the end. We went through Express.js middleware. We discussed hashing passwords, local storage, and JSON Web Token. And how to add this to a new project. So I used the project of group 2, but if your code is not based on that, you can do 2 things. So you can check, let's get the I send this in the class as well. So then I'm gonna have to remember these URLs. But yeah, so I send this one in the branch will work on authentication. So this is the branch. You can just clone it locally in your machine and run the whole code locally and see if it works. Or if you don't want to run it and you just want to see the changes, you can go down in history and see the commits that I added starting from 5th of November. I merged the guy's code into my code. So anything that they have here that's not me is not related to authentication. So this just adds a JSON Web Token to package the JSON, meaning I ran yarn add JSON Web Token. So you can go through them one by one. Fix React errors in search bar. Again, you can ignore that. Class names. I was fixing some bugs or some warnings in the React console in the browser. You can ignore this. Add a basic login form. So okay, so here we're getting started. So I added a login component, a basic login component. That submits this to the server along with a button in the header and along with a route. And yeah, that's it, just the login thing. We continue on, add initial auth controller or route to starting working on the server. So this is the initial controller with the check login info. In the beginning, I was just comparing the password as plain password, and later on I used bcrypt. And you can go on with the commits that way, bottom to top, and you can see the changes one by one if you want to follow the progress of me creating this. If not, it is really easy to find the files either through the video, or I could just send you the list of files that are changed. But generally, the things you care about the most is starting from the server will be the auth controller, the auth route, and of course check the index next to that and how it's set up, but the actual code is in these places, mainly the auth controller. So again, auth route, the index. I added the error, unauthorized error, and used it in the controller as well, so you might want to include that. And I protected one of the routes, one of the event routes, using the malware created in the controller here in these 3 lines. You don't have to copy the file, but you might want to be able to use the malware in your server routes. So that will be the whole server. And then in the client, I created the login and logout component. So I showed the login component, but I'm not 100% sure I showed the logout. So this is the logout component. If it gets called and there's a route that points to this one, and when it gets called, it will remove the auth token from local storage and then redirects to home page. And the effect of this one will trigger the app.js to re-render again. And once that re-renders, we actually it will update the context. Then when the context gets updated, it will update the header and update everywhere that depends on the login value. What else? And I'm going to show this in the. I'm going to put breakpoints everywhere in the browser and see the changes. But before I do that, let me go through the rest of the files. So we have these 2 components, login and logout. And then there's the context login with the creation itself and the method that loads it. And lib auth is the protected fetch. And then in app.js, I just wrapped everything in login context of provider. And of course, in the render in the beginning, I would load the context value. So it gets loaded every time and gets updated with every render. So please remember that it has to be under the render. And then I had an example of using class names in events to show, but not show, to disable or hide or show or not show the add button based on the list of context that is logged in. So it's just an example. You don't have to use that. So now we can go to the browser, and I want to log out. I want to log in and log out and see the changes that are happening here. So we're going to have the application. So now we don't have the auth token here, and I will go to app.js, and here in the render, I'm going to have a breakpoint here, and I'm going to go to the header.js, and I will have another breakpoint here that will stop in this point, and I think that's enough. And maybe another in the login. Do I need another in the login? Well, I guess this is in the context. It's not going to hurt. So login / component. Here is where we're going to set the item. So let's log in now. So when I click this, include the context. I'm going to continue. It went and loaded the value, and this is the value now because we don't have the auth token here. Go to sources again, and we're going to continue. Then I'm going to enter the values. I'm going to enter best that have future, and the password will be Decode. Then it will have the second breakpoint in the login component where in the response we got the value from the server with the token. So we're going to set that in the local storage. Let's confirm that it's empty first. It's not here. I'm going to go here. I'm going to continue. And let's go back to application, and now we have it. So, and then it hits home page. So the render in app.js was triggered automatically. It's going to go load the context value. So we're going to step in the function, and we'll run in these. Yes. So step out, step over, next function call. So it will get the item from the local storage. It has this value. It will console log it. Then it will check that it's valid. Then it will decode the value. Then the decoded value will be this, containing the email, hest@hackthefuture.com. Then we'll create this object with isLogged and true with the token and the email from the decoded auth token, and it's going to return the context value. And if we go back here, then we have the context value. It's going to be set in the provider, and it will be received in the header and in all components really. So now in the header we have this value to true. It was set to false before. And now we can see the login button. So we render the login button when this is false, but now this is true. So it will render the first section, which will render the log out button and the email. So let's do that, and we see it. And that's how everything works with the login, log out. We protect the routes, and we change the UI as well. So I hope that's helpful. If you guys have any questions, this is a lot taken in one time, so please feel free to ask whenever you want, and I'll be happy to join you in a call or arrange another call for all of us if you have a lot of questions, a lot of common questions. But for now, yeah, thanks for today. You guys stayed long with me, and I really appreciate that, and I wish you guys the best. Cool. Have a good night.